2.3 goes over solving inequalities using multiplication or division. So when we are working with these inequalities, we're doing the same exact thing as we did when we solved equations by multiplying or dividing. However, now we just have that inequality sign and we're graphing the solution. So if we look at example 1, we have x over 8 is greater than negative 5. That x over 8 is the same thing as x divided by 8, so we're going to multiply each side by that 8 to get rid of it on the left side. So the 8's cancel out, and we have that x is greater than negative 40. Our x comes first, so on our number line, we're going to have the negative 40. I'm going to do a negative 30 and a negative 50. You could do negative 39, negative 41, that's fine. I just chose to do it this way, so that's the way we're going to do it. For this one, again, your variable comes first, your sign points to the right, so we're going to have an open circle on that negative 40, and our line will run to the right. And remember, there's no equal to here, or there's no line underneath that inequality sign, so that's why we have an open circle on that negative 40. For B, we have negative 24 is greater than or equal to 3x. So we're going to start by dividing each side by that 3 to get x by itself. We're going to have negative 8 is greater than or equal to x. Now with this one, our x does not come first, so we're going to rewrite it to where x comes first. Right now, that sign is open to the negative 8, so we're going to keep it open to the negative 8 when we rewrite it, and we're just going to have x is less than or equal to negative 8. On our number line, we're going to have that negative 8, and we're going to have negative 7 as well as negative 9. If you wanted to do something like negative 8, negative 4, negative 12, that's fine. Wouldn't be wrong. We're going to have a closed circle on that negative 8 since our inequality is also equal to and it has that line underneath it. Our variable comes first and the x is less than or equal to negative 8. Our sign points to the left, so our line will run to the left as well. For C, we have n over 7 is greater than or equal to negative 1. So we are going to multiply each side by the 7. The 7's will cancel, so we just have n is greater than or equal to negative 1 times 7, which is negative 7. From here, our variable comes first, so we can draw our number line. We're going to have that negative 7, a negative 6, and a negative 8. Our inequality is also equal to, so we're going to include that negative 7, so we'll have a closed circle because there's that line there. Our variable comes first in our inequality. Our sign points to the right, so our line will run to the right. For D, we have negative 6.4 is greater than or equal to 1 over 5 times W. That 1/5 times W is the same thing as saying 1 times W and keep it over 5. So it's the same thing as saying negative 6.4 is greater than or equal to W over 5. So in order to get that 5 away from that W, we're going to do the opposite of division and multiply it by each side. So we're going to multiply this side by 5 as well as this side by 5. So these 5's cancel, and we're just left with W. We're going to write down our inequality sign and do the 5 times negative 6.4. A positive times a negative is a negative, and 6.4 times 5 gives us 32. So we're just going to rewrite this now to where our W comes first. So we're going to keep our sign open to the negative 32. So it's just going to be W is less than or equal to negative 32. On our number line, we're going to have that negative 32, that negative 31, and that negative 33. So So we are going to have a closed circle on that negative 32. Since our variable comes first in our final inequality, we are going to point our line to the left because our sign points to the left. For our next example, example E, we have 4b is greater than or equal to 36. So we're just going to start by dividing each side by that 4 to get b by itself. And b is greater than or equal to 9. Our variable comes first. We draw our number line. We have that 9. We have 10. And we have 8. That 9 is going to get a closed circle on it since our sign has the line underneath it. Our variable comes first. Our sign points to the right, so our line will run to the right as well. For F, we have negative 18 is greater than 1.5 times Q. So we're going to divide each side by this 1.5 to get Q by itself. These are going to cancel. So we just have Q is less than, here, sorry, we're going to do that Q underneath the same Q that we already have. Q, our sign, then we have negative 18 over 1.5. That 1.5 has to turn into a 15 to make it a whole number, which makes the negative 18 a negative 180. So this is just negative 180 divided by 15. If we did the negative 180 divided by 15, a negative divided by positive is a negative, and 15 goes into 180 12 times. So it's negative 12 is greater than Q. We want to rewrite this to where Q comes first. Our sign is open to the negative 12, so it's going to stay open to negative 12. So Q is less than negative 12. On our number line, we're going to have the negative 12, the negative 11, and the negative 13. We're going to have an open circle on that negative 12 since it's not equal to. Our sign points to the left when our variable comes first, so our line will run to the left as well. The next part of our lesson goes into multiplying or dividing by negative numbers. When we multiply or divide by negative numbers in inequalities, it's a little bit of a trickier circumstance because you have to remember to switch your sign if you're dividing by a negative or if you're multiplying by a negative on both sides. So if we look at the next example, 2a, we have 2 is less than y divided by negative 3. In order to get that negative 3 to the other side, we are just going to multiply it by each side. However, we are multiplying each side by a negative, so we are also going to flip the sign. Remember, when you divide or multiply by the negative, you're switching the value because it's becoming the opposite, which is why we flip the sign. So you want the opposite of the sign as well. So we just flip it when we multiply each side or divide each side by the negative. So a negative 3 times 2 gives us negative 6. We flip the sign. The negative 3's on the right side cancel out, and we're just left with y. We're going to rewrite this to where our y comes first. Our sign is open to the negative 6, so it's going to stay open to negative 6. So y is less than negative 6. On our number line, we're going to have the negative 6, the negative 5, and the negative 7. We're going to have an open circle on the negative 6. Y comes first in our inequality that we finalized with. So on our number line, our sign tells us which way to draw our line. So we'll draw our line opening or going to the right. For B, we have negative 7y is less than or equal to negative 35. So we're going to start by dividing each side by that negative 7. You're dividing each side by a negative, so we switch the sign. So y is greater than or equal to a negative divided by a negative is a positive. 35 divided by 7 is 5. Y is greater than or equal to 5. This is our final inequality, so now we graph it. We're going to have our number line. On that number line, we're going to have the 5, the 6, and a 4. We are going to have a closed circle on that 5, since we have a line underneath that inequality. Our variable comes first. Our sign points to the right, which means our line will run to the right as well. For example C, we have P divided by negative 4 is less than 7. So we are going to multiply each side by this negative 4. Since we're multiplying by a negative on each side, we flip the sign. The negative 4s are going to cancel. We'll be left with P on that left side. We switch the sign to be open to P. And 7 times negative 4 is negative 28. So P is greater than negative 28. To graph this, we are going to have the negative 28, the negative 27, and the negative 29. We are going to have an open circle on that negative 28. P comes first, our sign points to the right, our line will run to the right as well. For D, we have x divided by negative 5 is less than or equal to negative 5. So we're going to multiply each side by this negative 5. You're going to cancel out on the left side. Your sign will switch. So x is greater than or equal to negative 5 times negative 5 gives us a positive 25. For this one on your number line, if you want to have the 25, you want to do 24 and 26, that's fine. If you want to do 30 and 20, that's fine as well. If you want to do 35 and 15, that's fine. So on our number line, we're going to have a closed circle on that 25, since it's also equal to. Our sign points to the right with our variable first, so our line runs to the right as well. For E, we have 1 is greater than or equal to negative 1 over 10 times z. Now, this is the same thing as saying 1 is greater than or equal to negative z over 10. If you want to do this, that way you can, or you can just multiply each side by the reciprocal of that negative 1 over 10, which is negative 10. So we multiply each side by that negative 10. This cancels out the negative 1/10. Our sign switches. Negative 10 times 1 is negative 10, is less than or equal to z. We rewrite this to where z comes first. So z is greater than or equal to negative 10. On our number line, we're going to have that negative 10. I'm going to do negative 5 and negative 15 as well. I'm going to have a closed circle on that negative 10. My z comes first in that last inequality. My sign points to the right, so my line will run to the right as well.
Why would you do minus 10 then?
What do you mean a minus 10? You're not subtracting 10. You're multiplying each side by the negative 10 to cancel out the negative 1 over 10. So remember, when you have a fraction with the denominator, if you multiply the fraction by its denominator, it cancels out the denominator. So you're doing the same thing here. Since your numerator is 1, you just take the reciprocal of that fraction and multiply it by each side in order to get rid of that negative 1 over 10 in front of the z. Remember, multiplying by the reciprocal is the same thing as dividing by a fraction.
Thank you.
You're welcome. For f, we have negative 9 times m is greater than 63. So we're going to divide each side on this one by the negative 9. We flip the sign. The negative 9's cancel, so m is less than negative 7. On our number line, we're going to have that negative 7, a negative 6, and a negative 8. We have an open circle on that negative 7, and our line runs to the left since m is first, and our variable points to the left. Or sorry, our inequality sign points to the left. For g, we have negative 2r is greater than or equal to 22. So we're going to divide each side by that negative 2. Our sign flips. R is less than or equal to negative 11. So on our number line, we have negative 12, negative 11, negative 10. We have a closed circle on negative 11, and our sign runs to the left since our sign, if our line runs to the left since our sign points to the left. For h, we have a negative 0.4y is greater than or equal to negative 12. So I'm just going to divide each side by this negative 0.4. Those 0.4's cancel. My sign switches, so y is less than or equal to 120 divided by 4. The reason why I have this is because I don't want to divide by that 0.4, or I can't have 0.4 in a fraction, so I make that 0.4 a whole 4, which means I move the decimal point on that 12 as well, making it a 120. So I do the 120 divided by 4, and I get 30. So y is less than or equal to 30. On our number line, I'm going to do a 20, a 30, and a 40. I'm going to have a closed circle on that 30, and my line is going to run to the left since my sign points to the left. For our next examples, we get into word problems. For example 3A that's done for us, it tells us that you earn $9.50 an hour at your summer job. Write and solve an inequality that represents the number of hours you need to work to buy a digital camera that costs $247. So if you work $9.50, or if you work so many hours, you get $9.50 an hour. That's $9.50 times n is greater than or equal to the $247, so that way you have at least the $247 to buy the camera. If you were to solve that, you would just divide each side by the 9.5, which gives you n is greater than or equal to 26. For some word problems that are not done for us, for example B, it tells us that you have at most $3.65 to make copies. Each copy costs 25 cents. Write and solve an inequality that represents the numbers of copies you can make. So when you do this, you have at most $3.65. Each copy is 25 cents. So the copies are 25 cents a piece, so we can represent that as 0.25 times C. We have at most $3.65 to make copies. So our copies cannot be more or equal to the 3.65. So our copies have to be less than or equal to 3.65. When we divide each side by the 0.25, we will get our answer that we're looking for, that C is less than or equal to 14.6. Now, you can't make 0.6 copies or partial copies that are wholes. So this would, we would go down to 14, so you can make at most 14 copies. For our last example, example C, it tells us that the maximum speed limit for a school bus is 55 miles per hour. Write and solve an inequality that represents the numbers of hours it takes to travel 165 miles in a school bus. So our rate is the 55 miles per hour. Your distance is 165 miles. Our formula for distance is equal to your rate times your time, but it tells you that the maximum speed limit for a school bus, so it can't go over that, has to be 55 miles per hour. So if we want, we can do this to where our distance is divided by our time to get our rate. So our rate is no more than the 55 miles an hour. So our rate has to be, here, let's do this. We're going to put 165 as our distance over our time. Our rate is our rate is the 55 miles an hour. Our distance is the 165 over our time. Like I said, our maximum speed, so it can't go over the 55 miles per hour. So the 55 miles per hour is less than or equal to the 165 over t. In order to find what t is, we're just going to multiply each side by t. These would cancel. So 165 is greater than or equal to 55 times t. And then we just divide each side by the 55. And t comes down, your sign comes down. The 165 divided by 55 is 3. So when we rewrite this to where t comes first, we have t, our time, is less than or equal to 3 hours.